The call came as I was meticulously reassembling the fractured mandible of a Pleistocene-era wolf, its enamel still bearing the microscopic striations of ancient prey. My workspace, a quiet sanctuary deep within a university research wing, hummed with the soft thrum of air filtration and the distant clatter of a ventilation system. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of late-afternoon sun piercing the high window, illuminating my focused breath. I preferred the company of bones, of echoes from forgotten eras, to the insistent demands of the living. My phone, a relic I kept primarily for emergencies, vibrated against the worn oak of my desk, its insistent buzz a jarring intrusion. The caller ID displayed Detective Miller. I let it ring. Miller was persistent, a bulldog of a man who saw me as his last resort when the world presented him with a puzzle too intricate for his standard toolset. The ringing stopped, then immediately resumed. He knew I was there. I sighed, a puff of air disturbing a fine layer of bone dust. "Cole," I answered, my voice a low rumble, still attuned to the quiet concentration of my work. "Cole, it's Miller. You need to come in, now." His voice was tight, clipped, the usual banter absent. That got my attention. Miller only dropped the pleasantries when something truly defied explanation. "Another cold case with a 20-year-old skull fragment?" I queried, already knowing the answer. My specialty wasn't the fresh kill, but the deep past, the stories etched in bone over millennia. "No, Cole. This one's fresh. Too fresh. Elias Thorne. You know the name." The name hit me like a physical blow. He lived in a smart home so advanced it was rumored to be self-aware. "Thorne? What about him?" "He's dead, in his own house. No forced entry, no weapon, and the damn medical examiner can't even agree on a time of death." "It's a clean slate, Cole. Too clean. We've got nothing. Local authorities are baffled and the brass is breathing down my neck. I need your eyes on this. Things only you see." My initial reluctance warred with a prickle of professional curiosity. An impossible crime, in an impossible house, involving an impossible victim. This wasn't a historical puzzle. It was a contemporary enigma, a perfect storm of the technological and the inexplicable. "Send me the coordinates. I'll be there." The drive took longer than I liked, the city's ceaseless thrum a stark contrast to my quiet lab. As I approached the address, the smart home loomed, a sleek, minimalist monolith of glass and steel nestled discreetly amongst ancient oaks. It was less a house, more a fortress designed by an architect with a penchant for digital invisibility. The perimeter was alive with flashing emergency lights, uniformed officers, and the hushed, urgent voices of investigators. Media vans, their satellite dishes extended like predatory antennae, were already camped a quarter-mile down the private road, held at bay by a temporary barricade. Miller met me at the reinforced entrance, his face a mask of weary frustration. "Glad you could make it. This way." He led me through a series of biometric scanners and reinforced doors that slid open with barely a whisper, the house itself seeming to monitor our every move. The air inside was cool, sterile, scented faintly with ozone and something metallic, the pervasive smell of high technology. "The place is a marvel of security," Miller explained, his voice low. "No windows open, no vents large enough for a person, every entry point monitored by multiple systems. We've checked every inch, not a single breach. And yet..." He gestured vaguely down a long, polished corridor. It felt less like a home and more like a high-end exhibition space. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft click of our shoes. "Thorne was found in his personal data core," Miller continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper as we approached a heavy, unmarked door. "His inner sanctum, if you will. The man lived and breathed data. Spent more time in there than anywhere else, apparently." He swiped a badge and the door hissed open, revealing a sight that immediately grabbed my attention. Rows of towering server racks stretched into the distance, Their indicator lights a mesmerizing chaotic dance of red, green, and amber. Each rack held dozens of black boxes, sleek and purposeful, connected by a tangle of fiber optic cables that snaked like glowing veins. On a raised platform in the center, amidst the silent, powerful hum of information processing, lay Elias Thorne. His body was positioned almost reverently on a plush, ergonomic chair, facing a bank of massive curved monitors that displayed a cascade of incomprehensible code and complex financial graphs. He looked utterly serene, as if merely resting. There was no visible trauma, no struggle, no spilled coffee cup, no disarray of any kind. Miller gestured to the surrounding environment. Forensics swept the area. Not a single foreign fingerprint, no trace DNA that isn't Thorne's, not even a dust mote's out of place. The temperature logs from the server racks are perfectly stable. It's like he just stopped. I ignored Miller, my gaze sweeping across the scene. I didn't need a medical examiner to tell me a man of Thorne's stature wouldn't simply stop. My eyes, trained to see the subtle narratives in decay and disruption, sought the anomaly, the break in the pattern. Everything was exactly as it should be, perfectly ordered, perfectly secure. Then I saw it. Not on Thorne, not on the chair, nor on the pristine floor. My gaze fixed on one of the server racks, specifically on the side panel of a particularly large unit labeled Thorne Core Primary. Amidst the microscopic scratches and scuffs that were inevitable on such equipment, a singular, almost imperceptible mark stood out. It was a faint, shallow indentation, no larger than a pinpoint, just above a cooling vent. It wasn't a scratch from a tool or a scuff from a cleaning cloth. It was a precise, almost surgical depression, as if something incredibly small, yet incredibly hard, had been pressed there with deliberate force. I knelt, pulling a small, powerful magnifier from my kit. Under its lens, the mark resolved into a tiny, almost perfect circle, its edges sharp, as if made by a precision instrument. It wasn't a defect in the metal. It was an impact point, a ghost of a wound on the machine itself. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a baffling death. It was an impossible murder, executed with a surgical precision that defied every conventional understanding of crime. And I, Cole, was going to find out how. The servers pulsed with life, their collective hum a low, constant vibration against the sterile air. The complex network, Elias Thorne's digital fortress, continued its silent operations even as its creator lay still. My gaze, trained to dissect the subtle narratives of decay and disruption, sought the anomaly, the break in the pattern. The co-opted silence of the house, broken only by the mechanical breathing of the infrastructure, was itself a paradox. "Cole, the local authorities are getting antsy." The detective's voice cut through the hum, his tone a blend of impatience and deference. "They want a preliminary. We've been here for hours." I turned, my eyes briefly meeting his before sweeping past him to the other uniformed officers clustered near the entrance of the main living area. They looked like oversized statues in Thorne's minimalist glass and steel mansion, their expressions a mixture of bafflement and discomfort. This wasn't their usual territory of forced entry and blunt force trauma. This was surgical, almost ethereal. "ANSI doesn't solve impossible," I replied, my voice steady. I moved toward the victim, Elias Thorne, stretched out on a polished obsidian floor. No overturned furniture, no scuff marks on the immaculate surface. The scene was disturbingly pristine, as if death had been a pre-programmed event, a graceful shutdown rather than a violent termination. His expensive silk shirt was uncreased, his hands resting gently at his sides. No defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle. It was the absolute lack of disruption that screamed loudest. His biometric locks registered no unauthorized access. A security specialist, a woman with tight, efficient movements, stated from a tablet she held. Every sensor, every camera feed is clean. No anomalies in the perimeter, no breach in the internal network. I knelt beside Thorne, not touching, but observing. His skin had a waxy pallor, but there were no visible injuries. No ligature marks, no punctures, no contusions. His eyes were open, fixed on the distant ceiling, holding a final, unreadable question. My training dictated a comprehensive assessment of the environment before disturbing the primary evidence. The mansion itself was a monument to Thorne's vision. Smart glass walls that shimmered with customizable displays, furniture that seemed to grow organically from the floor, and an air of clinical perfection. And yet, within this unbreachable space, a man had died. "Show me his workspace," I instructed, rising. We passed through a vast open-plan living space, past a kitchen that gleamed with unused chrome, until we reached the nerve center of the house. It was a dedicated chamber, meticulously organized, its walls lined with racks of equipment. The air here was cooler, tinged with ozone. Rows upon rows of blinking lights created a hypnotic, almost meditative rhythm. This was the heart of Thorne's digital empire, a testament to his obsession with data and control. We walked down a narrow corridor, deeper into the digital labyrinth. "This is his primary server farm," the security specialist explained, gesturing with her tablet. "All proprietary data, cold storage, and network infrastructure, heavily secured." I nodded, my eyes scanning the intricate arrangement of hardware. The cool air, the constant hum, the rhythmic flashing of indicators. It all spoke of immense processing power, of secrets locked away behind layers of digital encryption and physical barriers. My gaze drifted over the labels. Thorne Corp R&D, Project Chimera, Secure Assets. The paradox deepened with every observation. How could a man die without any visible cause in a space so meticulously monitored, so absolutely sealed? One suggested a few hours prior, another pushed it back to late last night. The house's environmental controls were flawless, maintaining a consistent temperature and humidity, which could skew traditional decomposition indicators. There was no dust here, no fingerprints beyond a faint smudged print on a nearby panel that could belong to anyone who maintained the systems. "Have any of these been accessed recently?" I asked the security specialist, my voice low. She checked her tablet, her brow furrowing. "No, Cole, not according to the logs. Last access for this bank was 3 weeks ago. Automated backups only." I hummed, a low, thoughtful sound. My eyes narrowed, focusing on a minute detail. It looked more like something had been dragged, ever so slightly, or perhaps scraped against the surface with immense precision. It was too slight for an accident, too deliberate for an oversight. And it was the only imperfection in a flawless environment. The scuff mark, tiny as it was, suggested a movement, an interaction that simply shouldn't have occurred in this sterile, impenetrable space. The lack of struggle, the conflicting timelines, the unbreachable environment. It all pointed to an invisible hand, a ghost in Thorne's machine, leaving behind only the most subtle of forensic signatures. The faint scuff mark beneath the cold storage rack had been a whisper, a suggestion of something out of place in Thorne's otherwise sterile, meticulously ordered world. It was a detail I couldn't shake as I navigated the winding, dimly lit corridors of the secure complex, a facility nestled deep within what used to be a sprawling, abandoned factory district. The air here was cool, filtered, carrying the metallic tang of disinfectant and the distant hum of unseen machinery. This wasn't a place for the public, nor for casual observation. It was a realm of quiet finality, where bodies told their last, most intimate secrets. A colleague, a quiet man with spectacles perched low on his nose, met me at the entrance to the specialized examination room. He simply nodded, his gaze professional and uncommunicative. The room itself was stark. Stainless steel tables gleamed under banks of cool LED lights, instruments arrayed with surgical precision, and a large, articulated camera arm positioned above the central slab. No windows, just the hum of ventilation and the focused intensity of the task ahead. "Elias Thorne," I murmured, my voice a low rumble in the silence. I pulled on a fresh set of gloves, the latex snapping crisply against my wrists. The attendant, already positioned, drew back the sheet. Thorne lay before me, an almost serene expression on his face. The initial external examination confirmed what the patrol officer had reported. No obvious trauma. His skin was unblemished, his limbs relaxed, as if he'd simply drifted off to sleep. No defensive wounds, no ligature marks, no signs of struggle. His clothing, meticulously removed and catalogued by the initial response team, had been equally unrevealing. The man's life, it seemed, had ended with a quiet, almost imperceptible surrender. I began my systematic inspection, a ritual honed over decades. I noted the precise temperature of the body, the degree of rigor mortis, the lividity patterns. My preliminary findings suggested a death occurring within a tighter window than some had speculated, but still, nothing screamed cause. "We're looking for a ghost," I muttered, more to myself than to the attendant who silently recorded my observations. The internal examination began. My scalpel, a familiar extension of my hand, cut with practiced ease. The skin parted, then the muscle, revealing the intricate landscape beneath. Everything at first glance seemed remarkably normal. His heart, his lungs, his liver, all seemed to defy the grim reality of his death. It was frustrating, almost infuriating. This wasn't the work of a blunt object, a blade, or a bullet. This was something else. I continued, meticulously dissecting, observing, and collecting samples. As I delved deeper into the microscopic architecture of the tissues, a subtle anomaly began to emerge. It wasn't immediately apparent to the naked eye, but under the magnification of a specialized scope I'd brought with me, a uniform cellular disruption became visible. It wasn't necrosis, not yet, but a widespread, almost synchronized cellular fatigue, as if every cell in his body had simply given up simultaneously. The brain, too, presented a puzzle. No hemorrhage, no tumor, no obvious stroke. Yet the neural pathways showed signs of an incredibly rapid, widespread depolarization. It was as if a massive systemic electrical surge had coursed through him, shutting down every biological process at once, but without leaving the telltale scorch marks or the violent contractions one might expect from electrocution. It was too clean, too precise. I paused, leaning back from the table, my gloved hands resting on the cool steel. My mind raced, trying to reconcile these findings with the scene. An invisible, internal surge that left no external trace? It felt almost digital. He lived and breathed in a world of invisible frequencies, of data packets, of encrypted signals. Was it possible his death had mirrored his life's work? No external trauma, I articulated, my voice low. But internally, a complete system failure. A shutdown, almost instantaneous, affecting every major organ at a cellular level, yet without the usual indicators of toxins or physical force. The attendant adjusted his spectacles, his pen hovering over the log. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. The lack of struggle, the pristine scene. And now, this internal collapse that leaves no obvious fingerprint. If the cellular integrity was compromised in such a unique way, the usual markers of decay could be skewed, creating a confusing temporal signature. This wasn't a simple murder. It was an execution of exquisite, terrifying precision. Someone had found a way to kill Elias Thorne from the inside out, leaving the outside untouched, leaving a puzzle that defied conventional forensics. The impossible crime had just grown infinitely more complex. This wasn't a simple murder. It was an orchestrated impossibility. The cellular degradation I'd observed, the way the very building blocks of Thorne's body had been subtly yet thoroughly compromised, spoke of a method far beyond conventional means. It wasn't just about killing him. It was about erasing the precise moment of his departure, blurring the lines of cause and effect. The local authorities, however, were still struggling with the basics. I sat across from the lead detective in his cramped office, the air thick with stale coffee and unspoken frustration. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a precursor to a dead end. "No forced entry, Cole," the detective stated, his voice flat. "The smart home logs show no external breaches. Every sensor, every camera feed, pristine. His security system is Fort Knox. No weapon, no witnesses, no credible motive surfacing yet from his associates. Everyone's tight-lipped or genuinely clueless. We're chasing shadows." He tossed a stack of preliminary reports onto his desk. "The preliminary autopsy confirms the cellular breakdown you mentioned, but it's so esoteric. No known toxin, no obvious trauma. The chief wants answers, and we've got nothing but a dead tech mogul and a whole lot of questions that lead nowhere." I nodded slowly, my gaze drifting to the schematics of Thorne's smart home pinned to a corkboard. It wasn't just a house. It was a digital fortress. Every device, every appliance, every environmental control interconnected, logging every interaction. "That's precisely why we need to dig deeper into those logs," I countered, my voice calm but firm. If there's no physical breach, then the breach wasn't physical. Thorne lived in a hyper-connected world. His vulnerability might have been digital, not corporeal. The detective sighed, rubbing his temples. "We've had the digital forensic specialist on it for days. They've pulled everything. Billions of lines of code. Nothing out of place, they said. We're looking for something far more subtle. Something designed to appear authorized, or even like a system glitch. The way his body was affected, it suggests a manipulation of fundamental processes. If his very cells could be made to fail without external force, could his home systems be made to misbehave without an obvious hack? The idea was unsettling, a phantom hand twisting the dials from within. The detective stared at me for a long moment, skepticism warring with desperation in his eyes. "You think someone made his smart home kill him?" "I think someone manipulated his environment, his systems, in a way that contributed to his death. Then erased their tracks with surgical precision," I clarified. "If we're not finding anything obvious, it means it's either perfectly hidden. It's hiding in plain sight, disguised as normal system operations. I need access to the raw data. I want to sit with your digital forensic specialist. Every log, every sensor reading, every micro-event recorded by that house." Reluctantly, the detective made the call. Within the hour, I was being led through the labyrinthine corridors of the precinct's digital forensics unit. The air grew colder, the hum of machinery more pronounced as we approached the secure server rooms. "It's all here. We've run multiple anomaly detection algorithms, intrusion detection systems, everything we have. Clean slate." I nodded, undeterred. "I appreciate the thoroughness, but I'm looking for something less dramatic. Something that might be dismissed as background noise. Can we go through the environmental control logs? Temperature, humidity, air quality, lighting, power fluctuations. Not just the main house, but specific rooms, minute by minute." We settled in, the specialist pulling up the requested data. The screen glowed with endless lines of time-stamped entries. The room around us was a symphony of low-frequency vibrations and the rhythmic whir of cooling fans. Racks of servers stretched towards the ceiling, their indicator lights blinking in a silent, urgent dialogue. The air was frigid, smelling faintly of ozone and metal. Each blink, each flicker represented a hidden process, a transaction, a piece of information. For hours, we scrolled. The specialist pointed out the normalcy of the data. "See? The thermostat adjusted by half a degree at 8:02 Kelvin, standard programmed comfort setting. Lights dimmed in the study at 03 Autopsy, sleep cycle. And cross-reference it with the ambient temperature and humidity readings for that exact 10-minute window." The specialist executed the commands. A new set of graphs appeared, overlaying several data streams. "Still looks normal, Cole. Minor fluctuations, well within operational parameters." "Look closer," I urged, leaning in. "See this dip? For less than a minute, The fan speed dropped by 2%, and then it spiked by 3% immediately after for about 30 seconds. It's almost imperceptible, a fraction of a degree change in airflow, but it's an uncommanded change. There's no corresponding log entry for a user input or a programmed adjustment. The specialist frowned, scrutinizing the data. You're right, it's so small, our algorithms flagged it as environmental noise. A sensor hiccup, perhaps? Perhaps, I conceded. But then look at the light cycle in the same room. A flicker. Not a power surge, not a bulb failure. Just a momentary, almost unnoticeable dimming, then back to normal. And the air quality sensor, for a single second, registered a minor, transient spike in particulate matter. Again, no system command, no external event. Just, these weren't overt hacks. Individually, they were nothing. Someone hadn't broken into Thorne's smart home. They had bent it to their will, twisting its own functions against him, leaving behind only the faintest, almost imperceptible digital footprints. My breath still hitched, a phantom echo of the previous night's revelation. Those weren't overt hacks, not the kind that screamed for attention. They were micro-anomalies, fleeting digital whispers in the vast ocean of data, like a single pixel flickering in a high-definition image. Individually, they were nothing. It was sophisticated, insidious, and left no conventional trace. I knew the answer wouldn't be found solely in the digital realm. The digital ghost had a physical footprint, however minuscule. I needed to find the residue of its passage. Rows upon rows of racks stretched into the distance, each unit humming with a low, insistent thrum, punctuated by the rhythmic flicker of indicator lights, green, amber, red. A silent conversation in binary code. A young technician, his face pale under the fluorescent glare, watched me with a mix of awe and trepidation as I set up my portable forensic station amidst the towering server racks. Anything you need. My eyes already scanning the floor, the undercarriage of the racks, the air intakes. I was hunting for the invisible. I connected my high-resolution particle collector, its intake humming softly, drawing in air from around the specific server clusters that handled Thorne's home automation and environmental controls. This was where the digital commands for those subtle shifts would have originated or been routed through. Then I unpacked my field microscope, a robust portable unit, and a specialized electrostatic dust print lifter. I methodically swept the surfaces, particularly the access panels and the floor vents around the core processing units. The air here was filtered to an extreme degree, minimizing particulate contamination. Anything I found would be out of place, a trespasser. Hours bled into a slow, deliberate dance of collection and examination. My eyes burned, tracing patterns of microscopic dust, fibers, and inert metallic flakes that were the normal byproduct of this environment. Nothing stood out, nothing screamed anomalous. Frustration began to prick at the edges of my focus. Had I been wrong? Was the digital ghost truly without a physical echo? I leaned closer to the microscope eyepiece, adjusting the focus on a slide containing a sample from the air intake filter of Thorne's primary home automation server. It was a dense mat of filtered particles, common dust mites, textile fibers from the technician's uniform, tiny flecks of paint. All expected. Then, at the very edge of the field, a glint. It was unlike anything else. A minute, almost translucent shard, no larger than a grain of pollen, yet possessing a distinct, almost crystalline structure. It wasn't metallic in the conventional sense, nor organic. Under higher magnification, I saw faint, almost imperceptible striations running along its length, like miniature tool marks. I rotated the sample, adjusting the lighting. It was a microfilament shard, impossibly thin, almost invisible to the naked eye, and it absolutely did not belong in a data center filter. My breath hitched again, this time with a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just dust. This was a piece of something manufactured, something advanced. The striations suggested a deliberate, precise fracturing or shedding. This was a byproduct, a residue from a device. But what kind of device would shed a fragment like this? I thought back to the environmental shifts. Temperature fluctuations, pressure drops, subtle atmospheric changes. Such precise, localized manipulation would require highly specialized equipment, perhaps something capable of generating focused energy fields or rapidly altering air composition. A device with components so fine, so delicate, that a microfilament like this could be shed during its operation. And if it was shed here, in the data center, it implied the device itself, or at least a component of it, had been present. Perhaps assembled, calibrated, or even deployed from this very location. The implications hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just a remote hack. This was a physical intervention, precise and targeted, orchestrated with digital exactitude. The killer wasn't just a programmer. They were an engineer, a manipulator of the physical world at its most minute level. The ghost wasn't just in the machine. It had a body, however small, however fleeting. The microfilament shard was its fingerprint, an almost invisible link between the digital command and the physical consequence. The mystery hadn't just deepened, it had become terrifyingly complex. Frustration began to prick at the edges of my focus. Had I been wrong? It was a dust particle, yes, but its composition was entirely wrong. Not the typical epidermal flakes and textile fibers I expected from an impeccably clean smart home. This particle was crystalline, almost metallic, yet too small to be visible without significant magnification. It glittered faintly under the light, an anomaly that snagged my attention like a burr on wool. I pulled back, rubbing my eyes. The initial autopsy had indicated asphyxiation, but with no external trauma, no obvious ligature marks, and no struggle. The internal findings were ambiguous. A subtle inflammation of the respiratory tract, a slight edema, but nothing conclusive enough to point to a specific agent. The medical examiner had been baffled, admitting it looked like Thorne simply stopped breathing, his sophisticated home a sealed tomb. But the dust, the digital ghost. My mind began to churn, connecting disparate threads. Thorne's home was a fortress, controlled by a proprietary operating system, an AI that managed everything from climate to security. What if the very system designed to protect him had been weaponized? Not by an intruder, but from within. I remembered the peculiar energy spikes in the smart home's network logs, the phantom data packets that mimicked system diagnostics but led nowhere. The digital ghost. I'd dismissed it as an elaborate red herring, a hacker's signature. But what if it was more? What if it was the controller? My radical hypothesis began to coalesce. Thorne hadn't been poisoned by a conventional agent. He hadn't been physically attacked. He had been suffocated by his own environment, precisely and deliberately. The crystalline particle in the air filter, I now theorized, wasn't just dust. It was residue. The smart home's climate control system, I realized with a jolt, was designed for perfect atmospheric regulation. What if that regulation had been subtly, maliciously altered? Not a crude gas, easily detected, but a calculated depletion of oxygen, or the introduction of a near-inert gas that displaced oxygen without triggering alarms. Or, even more chilling, a particulate, so fine it bypassed the body's natural defenses, causing a cellular-level disruption that mimicked natural causes. The reveal hit me with a cold clarity. The digital ghost wasn't just a footprint, it was the finger on the trigger. Someone had remotely accessed Thorne's home automation, not to steal data, but to manipulate the very air he breathed, delivering a silent, invisible killer through the ventilation system. The crystalline particles were likely a byproduct of this process, or a component of the lethal agent itself, too small to cause immediate irritation but devastating in its cumulative effect on the respiratory system. A slow, insidious process, not an instantaneous one, making it difficult to pinpoint the exact moment of incapacitation versus expiration. This wasn't a murder with a weapon. It was a murder by environment, orchestrated through code. But how to prove it? How to demonstrate that Thorne's own air supply, his lifeblood, had been turned against him by a remote digital command? I needed to simulate the conditions, not the entire house, but the core mechanism. I needed a secure, isolated environment where I could replicate the critical systems Thorne had relied upon. I knew just the place. I packed my minimal gear, the slides, the magnified images of the crystalline dust, the complex network logs. "Cole?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "A theory," I replied, "one that requires a very specific kind of laboratory." He just nodded, too tired to argue. He knew that when I got this glint in my eye, I usually found something. My destination was an off-site facility, a government-leased space typically used for secure data analysis. The rows of racks stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of humming machinery, each cabinet a fortress of processing power. Blue and green indicator lights pulsed in rhythmic unison, a silent digital symphony. The air was dry, charged with ozone, and meticulously filtered. This was where I could attempt my reconstruction. My colleague, a network forensics specialist named Anya, was already there, hunched over a console, her fingers flying across a keyboard. He looked up, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "You said it was urgent, Cole," he stated, his voice calm despite the late hour. "More than urgent," I confirmed, setting down my case. "I need to replicate a specific set of environmental parameters, controlled by a phantom network signature. We're talking about a digital ghost that didn't just steal data, Anya, it killed." Her eyebrows rose, a flicker of genuine shock crossing her usually impassive face. "Killed? How?" "By turning the air itself into a weapon," I explained, pulling up the network logs on a nearby monitor. "I need to isolate a section of this network, simulate Thorne's home automation OS, and then introduce the phantom code. Radical, Cole. Give me the parameters for Thorne's system. I'll carve out a sandbox for you. But if this doesn't work, Cole, we're chasing ghosts in more ways than one." I nodded, already pulling out diagrams of Thorne's HVAC system, the schematics of his air purifiers, and the curious readings from his environmental sensors. If my hypothesis was correct, the implications were terrifying. If I was wrong, then Elias Thorne's death would remain an unsolvable enigma, a digital phantom laughing in the face of justice. I began to outline the specific code sequences, the precise timing of the network anomalies, determined to coax the digital ghost back into the light and reveal its deadly secret. My gaze was fixed on the luminous display, the HVAC schematics laid bare across one monitor, environmental sensor logs scrolling on another. The low hum of the servers provided a steady, almost hypnotic drone, punctuated by the rhythmic blinking of countless indicator lights. Green, amber, red, each a tiny sentinel guarding its digital domain. My hypothesis, a nagging suspicion that had solidified over the past few hours, revolved around an intentional manipulation of Thorne's meticulously controlled living environment. Not a system failure, but a deliberate act. The initial reports had focused on the system's impenetrable security, the lack of external breaches. But what if the breach was internal? I zoomed in on the environmental sensor readings from Thorne's master bedroom suite. A sudden, sharp decline in ambient temperature, far below Thorne's usual comfortable 72 degrees, caught my eye. It wasn't a gradual shift. It was a precipitous drop, recorded precisely between 02:17 and 02:45 a.m. The system's automated climate control, designed to maintain a narrow temperature band, should have countered such a change instantly. Yet the logs showed no corrective action from the primary system. Instead, a secondary manual override command had been issued. My fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing the override timestamp with the system's access logs. The data scrolled, a stream of IP addresses and user credentials. Most were automated system checks or Thorne's own frequent adjustments. Then, there it was. An entry logged at 02:16 a.m., just before the temperature plummet, originating from an internal network address that wasn't Thorne's primary device. The user ID associated with it was an administrative account, typically reserved for high-level system maintenance, not daily climate control. "Well now," I murmured, the words feeling foreign in the sterile quiet. This wasn't a glitch. This was a command, a deliberate instruction to override the system's default parameters. I pulled up the specific administrative account's activity history. It showed infrequent use, mostly for major software updates or network reconfigurations. But in the hours leading up to Thorne's death, this account had been active, accessing and modifying critical environmental parameters. Not just temperature, but also the air circulation settings. A curious pattern emerged, a sharp drop in temperature, followed by a restriction of airflow within the bedroom, then a return to normal temperature and airflow a little under an hour later. The window of manipulation was tight, precise. This wasn't a random malfunction, nor was it an external hack. Someone, using an authorized administrative account, had intentionally created a hostile environment within Thorne's home. The sudden cold, the restricted air movement. For a man of Thorne's documented sensitivities to environmental changes, it could have been catastrophic. If the environment was manipulated to induce distress, the precise moment of cessation could be less about a single fatal blow and more about a cascading series of physiological events. "Detective?" I called out, my voice cutting through the server hum. The lead detective, who had been reviewing security camera footage on another monitor, turned, his expression unreadable. "I think I found something." He walked over. "This is a manual override, initiated through an administrative account at 02:16 a.m. It deliberately lowered the temperature in Thorne's bedroom and then restricted the airflow, all while the primary climate control system was bypassed." The detective leaned closer, his brow furrowed as he absorbed the information. "So, someone did this, from inside the system." "Precisely," I confirmed, a knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't an accident. This was a targeted manipulation of Thorne's living space, designed to create a specific adverse environmental condition. The timing aligns too perfectly with the revised window of his death. The detective ran a hand over his chin, his gaze sweeping across the blinking servers, as if searching for a phantom presence. An inside job, then. Someone with high-level access. Or someone who gained access to a high-level account, I corrected, though the distinction felt thin in the face of such calculated intent. This points directly to a human element, not just a technical flaw. The focus of the investigation, which had been squarely on the impenetrable tech, now had to pivot. The digital ghost I had been chasing wasn't a random anomaly. It was the deliberate footprint of a perpetrator. My mind raced, already sifting through the limited information I had on Thorne's inner circle. Who had administrative access to his system? Who stood to gain? The impenetrable smart home hadn't been breached from the outside. It had been turned against its owner from within. The tension in the room was no longer just the cold air. It was the chilling realization of a calculated, intimate act. The sterile air of the data center aisle-cold wallets and blinking servers suddenly felt charged, the silent blinking lights taking on an ominous quality. The digital ghost I'd been chasing wasn't an external entity, a phantom hacker breaching firewalls from afar. It was something far more insidious, a manipulation from within, like a virus replicating in its host. The killer hadn't broken into Thorne's digital fortress. They had simply used a key. Racks of humming servers stretched before me, their indicator lights a mesmerizing, relentless pulse of green and amber. I leaned closer to the monitor, the glow reflecting in my eyes. My fingers flying across the keyboard, sifting through terabytes of metadata Thorne's system had meticulously logged. The lead cyber forensics specialist, a quiet individual with an unnerving ability to speak in code, stood a respectful distance away. Anything that bypasses standard user authentication and administrator overrides. The specialist nodded, his fingers moving with practiced ease, pulling up a cascade of green text. I was looking for a pattern, a sequence of commands that didn't fit the routine operations of a smart home designed for optimal comfort and security. Any deviation, no matter how subtle, would be a blip on his perfectly ordered radar. Hours bled into each other. My eyes burned, tracing lines of code, IP addresses, and time-stamped actions. Most entries were innocuous. Automated climate adjustments, scheduled lighting changes, security system arming and disarming. Then, a cluster of entries appeared, dated roughly a week before Thorne's death. They were obscure, deep-level system calls, linked to a rarely used diagnostic port. My breath hitched. There, I pointed, my finger hovering over a line of code. What is this Protocol 7 Gamma? The specialist zoomed in. That's an internal maintenance protocol, Cole, designed for extreme system reboots or environmental recalibration in case of catastrophic failure. It allows for direct override of all primary environmental parameters: temperature, humidity, and atmospheric composition. Only a handful of engineers and Thorne himself knew it existed, let alone how to invoke it. A cold knot formed in my stomach, tighter than the wires bundling behind the server racks. And who had access credentials for this protocol besides Thorne? The specialist typed furiously, his brow furrowed. A very restricted list. The lead architect of Thorne's smart home system, his personal AI programmer, and 2 senior network engineers. He paused, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. And 1 former employee, a disgruntled security consultant who was terminated 6 months ago. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. This wasn't a random act. This was precision, surgical, and intimate knowledge of Thorne's most hidden vulnerabilities. The how was now terrifyingly clear. Someone had leveraged Protocol 7 Gamma, not to fix a system, but to break a life. Check the activation sequence. Was it a single burst or a prolonged series of commands? I pressed, my mind racing. The specialist scrolled through the logs. Prolonged. It looks like. A gradual alteration of the air quality. The method was brilliant in its cruelty and untraceability. It would leave no physical residue, no marks on the body, just a man slowly suffocating in his sleep. His own home turned into his tomb. The suspect list had narrowed dramatically, from an amorphous cloud to a very specific, very dangerous pool of individuals. This wasn't an external threat, but a betrayal from within Thorne's inner circle. The killer was not just familiar with Thorne's tech, they were intimately familiar with Thorne's life, his habits, his most guarded secrets, and they had weaponized them. The hum was a constant low thrum against my skull, a white noise generated by 1,000 tireless machines. The air, chilled to a precise, almost uncomfortable degree, carried the faint metallic tang of ozone. Each rack glowed with a rhythmic sequence of green and amber lights, a silent conversation between processors and memory banks. The method, as I'd finally deduced, was a slow, insidious depletion of oxygen, an environmental assassination. But why? That was the question that had gnawed at me, a persistent itch beneath my skin. He'd watched me with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope as I navigated the labyrinthine corridors of Thorne's digital infrastructure. He understood the gravity of what I was suggesting, that the system itself had been weaponized. These held the keys to Thorne's most valuable intellectual property, the unreleased innovations that could reshape the tech landscape. He was on the cusp of launching something truly revolutionary, a new quantum encryption protocol that promised absolute data security, rendering all existing methods obsolete. This wasn't just corporate espionage. It was an industrial revolution waiting to happen, and Thorne stood at its epicenter. I remembered the subtle anomalies in the smart home's environmental logs, the barely perceptible dips in oxygen levels that, over hours, would prove lethal. And then, the digital footprint. Not Thorne himself, but someone with the highest level of access. Someone who knew the architecture intimately, perhaps even designed parts of it. The lead architect, I murmured, the name a whisper in the echoing aisle. My internal monologue had finally given him a title. He was the one who had built Thorne's digital fortress, and he was the one who had turned it into a tomb. I pulled up the archived system logs on a diagnostics terminal, the screen a waterfall of scrolling code. There it was, buried deep within the system's diagnostic reports, a sequence of commands initiated not by a remote intrusion, but by a local terminal, one registered to the lead architect's biometric profile. It wasn't just the oxygen depletion. It was the simultaneous manipulation of the internal climate controls, designed to mask the subtle changes in air composition, turning a comfortable bedroom into an undetectable gas chamber. A brilliant stroke of misdirection. Thorne's quantum encryption protocol wasn't just a technological leap. It was a threat to existing power structures, to the very companies that thrived on the vulnerabilities of current systems. The lead architect, I now realized, hadn't just been passed over for a promotion or felt undervalued. He had been offered an unimaginable sum, a king's ransom, to cripple Thorne's project and deliver the schematics to a rival consortium. Corporate espionage, yes, but far more sinister. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, calling up the lead architect's personal files. Thorne had discovered the betrayal, not through a security audit, but through a chance conversation, a slipped word, a minor discrepancy in a project timeline. Thorne had confronted him, discreetly at first, then with increasing intensity. The architect, cornered, facing not just professional ruin but potentially criminal charges for intellectual property theft and corporate sabotage, had seen his carefully constructed future crumbling. This wasn't just about money or corporate secrets. It was about a personal vendetta born of desperation and perceived humiliation. Thorne, the visionary, had inadvertently become the architect's executioner, forcing his hand. The suffocation wasn't just a silent kill. It was a symbolic act, a reversal of power. Thorne, the man who controlled everything, had been rendered utterly helpless in the sanctuary of his own creation. The architect had not merely taken Thorne's life, he had taken his control. The method was brilliant, the motive ancient. Power, greed, and the crushing weight of a secret. The digital ghost wasn't a random anomaly. It was the shadow of a man driven to murder. My task was almost complete. Now I just had to make the world see it. The chief of operations would need to understand the depths of this deception, the meticulously planned cruelty that had unfolded right under their noses. The tension in the air was no longer just the hum of the servers. It was the prelude to exposure. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a clinical, unforgiving glare, illuminating the fine dust motes dancing in the frigid air. My focus, however, was not on the silent sentinels of data, but on the figures before me. The lead detective stood with his arms crossed, his gaze shifting between me and the other man present. A corporate rival, known for his aggressive acquisitions and cutting-edge tech. There was also the company's lead programmer, a gaunt figure whose fingers twitched almost imperceptibly, as if still typing phantom lines of code. Their faces were taut, anticipating. I held the tablet in my hand, its screen glowing with the skeletal remains of Elias Thorne's digital life. The initial assessment was baffling, I began, my voice resonating in the sterile space. The smart home was, by all accounts, impenetrable. But that was the illusion. I tapped the tablet, bringing up a schematic of Thorne's residence. Elias Thorne's death was not a physical invasion, but a digital one. The smart home's environmental system was designed to be adaptive, regulating everything from air quality to temperature. Thorne was a creature of habit, and his system reflected that. But on the night of his death, the system recorded a series of anomalies. A precise, localized increase in an inert gas, likely nitrogen, followed by a rapid, targeted temperature drop. The lead detective leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. Nitrogen? To what end? Oxygen displacement, I explained, my gaze flicking to the lead programmer. His jaw was clenched. Silent, odorless, and undetectable without specialized equipment. Thorne would have simply fallen asleep. The system logs, meticulously archived here in this very data center, show a remote override. That was the killer's clever attempt to throw us off. After Thorne's death, the ambient temperature in his private chambers was systematically manipulated. First, a significant rise, designed to accelerate decomposition and suggest an earlier time. Then, a sharp drop to slow it down, creating the confusion in the forensic data. It required intimate knowledge of the home's systems, the forensic process, and the ability to execute these commands without tripping the main security protocols. My finger traced a line on the tablet, highlighting a specific log entry. This entry, time-stamped moments before the environmental system went rogue, shows an access granted to a unique identifier. An identifier that, according to the company's internal network architecture, belongs to one individual. I looked directly at the lead programmer. You, specifically. Your administrative credentials were used to bypass every failsafe Elias Thorne had built. The lead programmer's face, already pale, flushed a deep crimson. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape that wasn't there. That's impossible. My credentials were secure. Someone else must have used them. His voice was strained, thin. The logs show a unique pattern of access, a specific sequence of commands that only someone intimately familiar with Thorne's custom code would know. And the motive? Corporate espionage. Betrayal. Thorne was about to unveil a new encryption protocol, one that would have rendered several rival companies' data transfer systems obsolete. A protocol that, if leaked, would be worth billions. I gestured to the corporate rival. He stood to lose everything, but you, the lead programmer, you had the access. You have no proof. A desperate plan flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, he lunged, not at me, but towards the server rack. His speed, surprising for his build, was fueled by panic. He intended to destroy the evidence, to wipe the very logs I had just cited. The lead detective reacted instantly, but the programmer had a head start, his fingers already scrabbling at the rack's locking mechanism. I had anticipated such a move. As he reached the rack, I moved, not directly tackling him, but using the environment. I kicked out a rolling maintenance stool, sending it skittering across the polished floor directly into his path. He tripped, sprawling awkwardly, his hand slamming against the metal frame of the server. A sharp yelp of pain escaped him as his wrist twisted. Before he could recover, the lead detective was on him, cuffing his hands behind his back. The metallic click echoed sharply in the silent room. The lead programmer struggled, grunting, but it was futile. His desperate act had failed. I watched him being led away, his eyes vacant, defeated. The hum of the servers continued, an indifferent symphony to the drama that had just unfolded. The digital ghost had been exposed, its human architect apprehended. Suddenly, the lead programmer lunged. His body, surprisingly agile for its sedentary profession, shot towards the server rack marked with the red tag. I saw the desperation in his eyes, the frantic energy of a cornered animal. This wasn't about escape. It was about obliteration. The detective, quicker than I anticipated, reacted instantly. He was a blur of motion, launching himself forward. I followed, my own instincts screaming. The cold air of the data center, usually a controlled environment, now felt charged with raw, desperate energy. The lead programmer's fingers, trembling with adrenaline, fumbled for the access panel. He knew the sequence, the specific combination of buttons that would initiate a cascade wipe. Every millisecond counted. I could see the small, glowing indicator on the cold wallet. A tiny blue light signifying its active, vulnerable state. The programmer's hand closed around a small metallic keycard, already poised to insert it into the slot. This wasn't just about deleting files. It was about physical destruction of the storage medium, a process designed to be irreversible. The detective tackled him, a grunt of exertion escaping his lips as they hit the raised floor tiles. The keycard skittered across the polished surface, clattering against a server rack before disappearing under another. A brief struggle ensued, the programmer thrashing, attempting to scramble back towards his objective. his eyes, wide and bloodshot, fixed on the red-tagged server with an almost religious fervor. He was willing to fight for its destruction. "It's over," the detective grunted, pinning the programmer's arms behind his back. "Don't make this worse." I knelt, scanning the floor, my gaze sweeping past blinking lights and snaking cables. There it was, glinting faintly beneath a network switch. The key card. I held it aloft for the detective to see. A silent confirmation. The programmer sagged, the fight draining from him as quickly as it had ignited. The truth, encrypted and hidden, was now within our grasp. A team of digital forensic specialists, already on standby, moved in, their movements precise and practiced. Its contents, I knew, held the definitive proof. The logs, the access codes, the hidden communication threads that linked the programmer to the sophisticated, almost untraceable digital murder of Elias Thorne. The digital ghost I had chased for weeks was about to materialize. Hours later, the data center had quieted. The lead programmer, along with several other implicated colleagues whose digital footprints we'd unearthed, was in custody. I stood by the large tinted window of a nearby administrative office, looking out at the city lights. The hum of the servers still echoed in my ears, a phantom sound. The case was closed. Justice, in its slow, methodical way, was being served. News channels were already ablaze with the story. The public, I imagined, was grappling with the implications. A world where your own technology could be turned against you, where the lines between physical and digital threats blurred beyond recognition. I thought of Thorne, a visionary who had built an empire on innovation, only to be undone by the very tools he championed. It was a stark reminder of the thin line between creation and destruction. The same code that could secure a home could also unlock it for a killer. The same network that connected the world could also become a weapon. My role in this, my quiet unraveling of bones and data, felt both crucial and isolating. It was a lonely pursuit, often thankless, but moments like these when the pieces finally clicked, when the truth emerged from the chaos made it worthwhile. I had given Thorne a voice, even if it was a digital one, speaking from beyond the grave. The city lights twinkled below, a vast network of human connection and digital entanglement. I wondered how many other digital ghosts lurked in its circuits, waiting for someone like me to unmask them. The age of the impossible crime, I realized, had only just begun, and I, Cole, would be waiting.